women are, femininity is.
Sexually pure, sexually promiscuous.
Yeah, that's tricky, isn't it? Pure and virginal, yet sexually alluring.
So
Objectified. Now here's the thing, group. Thank you so much. When you take a look at these lists, these lists that don't like exist anywhere. It's not like a book of lists you can go to or find this. How many of you know emotional, nurturing, delicate men? How many of you know strong, tough, aggressive, smelly women? Right? Like double hands. Okay. The thing is that why was this so easy for us to come up with these bifurcated, almost opposite lists? Where did you get that? Again, this wasn't a book that you read. It wasn't a text that you took in. How did you know this?
Society.
What do you mean?
They told you to be this way.
Who's they? Okay, the media has told you this. What else? Who stereotypes people? Okay, culture stereotypes people. Okay. I'm sorry, who has said that? Yes, sir.
You can get it from role models too, though.
Okay.
Like my mother, for example. That's why I would say those things.
Yeah. How many of you have seen evidence of these stereotypes? Absolutely. So stereotypes are stereotypes with a bit of truth in them, right? I mean, I know very strong, powerful, insensitive men. And I know very beautiful, nurturing, gentle, gracious, soft women. But here's the thing, that's not written into our DNA. Now, I might be stepping on a few toes here because I would argue that gender is learned and socially constructed. I am not denying testosterone. I am not denying biology, because if I did, I would hope you'd ask me to leave, because that would be really stupid of me to do, because I cannot deny that. But here's the reality. There are more than two sexes even. There are males, there are females, and then there are mixtures of males and females, what we call intersexed people, that have both masculine and feminine genitalia and hormones. There are 5 sexes. So if that's true, if it's true that there are combinations of maleness and femaleness, can we agree that masculinity and femininity is culturally constructed? Absolutely. That doesn't make it wrong, and that doesn't make it bad. In fact, I love living into some of my feminine qualities. But there's other parts of me that are not feminine that I also love living into. And I'm a runner, and there's something that I do a lot, and that's called spitting. Okay? A lot. And for those of you that exercise, you need to do that, right? But I know that when I'm running with certain people, if I was to spit while running, they would think that that was not very feminine of me. Or if I belch, or if I fart, or if I do all those things, right? Would that be considered feminine? And likewise for my husband, to take that child that we had and hold it and sing it and cuddle it and nurture it and bathe it and dote over it. That's typically feminine things to do. But yet in his femininity, he was able to express that and still does. So here's where we start the conversation on communication. We have to start with this premise that men and women, although biologically different to some extent, our gender is constructed. How many of you have been to other cultures where you've seen masculinity and femininity played out differently? It looks different in how it's done. Someone give me an example. Yes, ma'am.
Men will like kiss each other when they embrace.
Yes, okay.
Which would like never fly here.
Okay, other examples. Yes, ma'am.
Men holding hands.
Yes. Okay. Yes, other things, other ways in which you've seen gender done differently. Okay. I would also suggest, before we specifically start talking about communication, that when we talk about masculinity in particular, I think masculinity, and again, I'm not a man, so I can only base this off of what I experience in my masculinity as a female, because I have masculine traits. But then in talking to men and reading about men, not about what they've done, but about what it means to be a man, that there's really something that exists today called the Act Like a Man box, right? There's a box. And I think this box exists for some women in terms of Act Like a Woman box, excuse me. But this Act Like a Man box, I'm just going to kind of draw an image up here for you to see what I'm talking about. We keep men in boxes, and we do it through multiple avenues. To act like a man, right? What does that mean? It means to be tough. It means to be strong. It means to be straight, perhaps. It means to be rational. And when men step outside of this box, what do? We call them names. We call them fags. We call them gay. We call them pussies. We call them whatever we can to keep them in that box. We might even hurt them. We might beat them. We might kill them. We might punch them. And I'm not trying to exaggerate. I think we know that this is true. When we look at examples of men that act outside of masculinity, the ramifications can be pretty severe. My son's coach, soccer coach, brought the boys over. They're 6. Brought the boys over and was talking to them. Don't be little pussies, right? So my husband jumps up and walks over to the coach after he's done doing his little thing. And he says, don't you ever call my son a pussy. Not because of that word, because that's a pretty derogatory term. But because what you're saying is don't you ever act in any sort of feminine way. Right? So this masculinity box, I think, is rigid. Now here's the thing. I think it can change, and I think it will change, but take a look at all the evidence we have of men being hurt, violated, beat, called names. Even women who do this. I mean, women, we do this to men. We call them gay, we call them fags, we call them whatever it is. I mean, it's not just men doing this to men, it's women too. It's different for women, I think, to some extent today. Women have a little bit more flexibility in being masculine. We have a little bit more flexibility in how we act and how we hold our bodies. So it's within this context we must start. That there exists this masculinity box. And for a man to act feminine, which is a quality God gave him, and then to be called gay, fag, sissy, right? You are denying that man a part of his personality. Not only that, you're sending a message that that part of his personality is not valuable, and in fact, it's wretched. Not to say like, oh, this is happy time now. But I think that's important to just kind of start with, that how we communicate with each other. We have to, in some extent, agree that in communication with the opposite sex, opposite gender, that we have to believe that we all have both feminine and masculine qualities. And if we can start there, if we can agree that when I'm in conversation with a man, that he has every ounce of capability of being emotional and sensitive, and if he believes that I have every ounce and capability of being strong and powerful, the beauty of our relationships. So before I kind of jump into communication, any thoughts on these ideas before we go any further? Thoughts or ideas or... Yes.
Question. So if like there are feminine and masculine traits in both like male and female, why call some of the traits feminine and some of them masculine?
Yeah.
Like why give them like gender?
Yeah. Our culture has made us do that. Right? Those are just that's the language that we're in, right? Our culture has decided these are masculine ideas, these are feminine ideas. And unfortunately, our culture has done a really good job of making them polar opposites. But I agree, let's, instead of saying your masculinity and your femininity, let's just talk about your humanity, your personality. Okay, here's why I'm not a psych major, and I wasn't a psych major, no offense. Sorry. Freud said biology is destiny. Yeah, I don't think so. Now, Freud was coming from a very specific context. My biology is not my destiny. It's part of my destiny, but it is not my destiny. So instead of saying we're different because we're male and female, let's pretend for a moment we're different because of our personalities. But here's the thing with gender. It gets really easy for us women to just kind of hang out in femininity and do it and do it and do it and do it so that we can convince other women that we're feminine and we can allure men. It's really easy to hang out in stereotypes because they're comfy and cozy. Right? And it's really easy, again, from speaking with men, it's really easy to hang out in this box. Because if I hang out at this box, it's easier. Life is easier. So stereotypes in some ways tell us a few things. Here's what we're told about how we talk, right? Men ask, women hint. These are stereotypes. We don't ask, we hint. Men want the facts. What are the facts? Women want the details. I don't care necessarily that she went from A to B. I want to know what she was wearing. I want to know which way she took. I want to know who she passed. I want to know who she talked to. Men are like, she went from there to there, period. Right? These are stereotypes. But there's always a little bit of truth in stereotypes. Men want to solve. Women want to be heard. Don't solve my problem, just listen to me. Men compartmentalize, right? Here is sports, here is girlfriend, here is school, here is food, here is bed, and here is the toilet, right? Women, stereotypically, we are integrated, right? We are integrated. We're thinking about all sorts of things all the time. Men speak way too little, and men speak way too little, and women speak way too much. Now again, these are stereotypes, but how many of you have seen evidence of this? Sure, of course, of course. So why is this important? Why is it important that we actually talk about this? I think the first reason why this is important is because we have to talk about it. We have to communicate with one another. You can hang out in your little same-sex, same-gender groups for a while, but when you enter the real world, you will be working with people that are different than you. You will have people that are above you and below you of the opposite gender, opposite sex. We can't just read people's minds. We have to talk about this, and oftentimes it's through kind of that perceived communication that we get perceived in the wrong way. How many of you have felt like someone has been talking with you, okay, and I don't care if it's the opposite gender or whatever, someone's talking with you, and no matter what you say, you cannot get across what you're trying to say. There is a lack, something is blocking that communication. No matter what you do, right, that you've been perceived the wrong way. So if that's the case, if we've all experienced that, let's talk about why and how we can challenge that. And I also think that when we are not able to communicate with one another, there are times we can feel devalued and denigrated. Devalued and denigrated. But I think it's through healthy, good communication, people can feel elevated, they can feel important, they can feel understood, and mainly they can be engaged. When I first accepted my job at George Fox, my husband and I had just had our second child when we moved from New York to Portland. So we had a 2-year-old and a 4-month-old. The 2-year-old was still alive. 4-month-old, it was up in the air. So at George Fox, they take all of their new faculty on a retreat. I don't know if your faculty does that here. We get to go away. So we go away to the beach. All the faculty get to go to the beach for a weekend, and I hope this happens with your faculty here. Do you know that if you're at Biola or wherever you're at, do you know that your faculty pray for you? Like, they pray for you. They pray for all of you. I remember at one faculty retreat, we got a list of all the incoming freshmen, and we prayed for every person by name. Okay, that's a side note. So, we're at this retreat, And if you're a first-time faculty, you are allowed to bring your spouse, partner with you. So Jeff came with me. And so Jeff came with me, and we brought the little 4-month-old, and every couple we met, or every group of people we met, this was very common. And it's just because we were new and people didn't know us. They'd walk up to Jeff and say, "Welcome to George Fox. We're so glad to have you here. What department are you in?" And he's like, "I'm with her." She's the new faculty member. So I thought, let's try something different. Why don't, instead of me holding the baby, why don't you hold the baby, and then let's see what happens, right? So Jeff's holding the baby. We're meeting new people. I go up to Jeff. "Jeff, we're really excited to meet you. Welcome to George Fox. What department are you in?" He's like, "I'm with her," right? Now these people weren't being mean. They just assumed, right? They assumed things, and that's okay. It's okay. It's fine. We get over it. But it's when we assume things and we communicate in certain ways that communication can break down. I did a little experiment once, and again, this was with the older one, who, by the way, middle school boys, help, please. I have 2 middle school boys. One's 13, one's 11. They are 5'8" and 5'9". 11 years old, 5'9". 13 years old, 5'8". These children are tall. They're tall and they're crazy. But the 13-year-old, who's shorter than his little brother, by the way, when he was 2 years old, maybe not even 2, maybe a little less than 2, I decided to do a little experiment. So Jeff left for work one day. I was getting ready for school, and I thought, this is awesome. So I called up my friend who had recently had a little girl about the same age. Now, what does like a 9-month-old baby look like? Of course, right? What else? They're kind of bald and fat and all waving around, right? You can't really tell. You can't really tell the gender of that child, right? So I said to my friend, "Can I borrow one of your little dresses?" She's like, "Is Jeff home now?" I said, "Nope." So she brought over this pink, cute little dress, right? Adorable, cute, all right. So I put my son in it, and he transforms before my very eyes from this swarthy little tank to this beautiful, dainty little girl. I was tempted to put lipstick, didn't go there. So I took this child, my child, and I took him to the supermarket, and at the grocery store they have those little bench seats that you can like stick the child in, right? So I plopped him in there, and I did this. I decided that I was not going to interact with the child. I wasn't going to talk to the child. I wasn't going to touch the child. I didn't want to give away any clues that this child was a he dressed as a she. So I started up and down the aisles, and I have to admit, my husband and I make beautiful babies, right? And he is beautiful. My child is as well. Walking up and down. Okay, so I'm going to try and mimic what I heard. Oh, isn't she beautiful? Oh my gosh, what's her name? Her name is Caleb. Oh, that's an interesting She's beautiful. Look at her soft skin. She looks just like you. I bet your husband wanted a boy, though, huh? I got that a couple times. Isn't that weird? Interesting. Beautiful. Oh, she's so sweet. I love her. Look at you. You look great. Okay. That was day 1. Same child next day. Different outfit. We didn't find out the sex of our children before we had them. So after the children were born, we got tons of crap sent to us, blue, all the things you need. And he had an outfit. It had a baseball hat. It had a little thing on it with a football and a baseball and a soccer ball, little shoes that looked like footballs, a rattle on it, and on the rattle there was like a little football on the rattle, and you couldn't get rid of it. And same child, same thing, different grocery store, husband gone, good deal, put him in there. No interaction, no contact, no touching, no anything. And this is what I hear. Oh, look at that big boy. That was strong. One person actually picked up his arm and like pounded his bicep. Check that out. What's his name? It's Caleb. Great name, strong name. Right? Oh, look at him. He's tough. Tough kid. I bet your husband's proud. Are you going to try for a girl next time? Yeah, I bet you will. Same kid. Oh, good, strong, tough. Fart. Whatever, I don't know. Again, I live with middle school boys. But the thing that I realized in that moment is that even before we're even aware, we're being sent messages about who we are. And that's okay, because it's beautiful and wonderful to be excited about your baby girls and your baby boys. But without even knowing it, we're sending messages to you, and I've been sent messages about what it means to be feminine and what it means to be masculine. And that even plays out in how we talk with one another. So here's what I want us to think about. I want us to think about that we are often not even aware of how we're doing this. And that's why it's important. And I also think it's through socialization that this has occurred through years and years of socialization. I'm standing in the grocery store, and there's a father, what I assume is a father, and his little daughter. You know, at the grocery store, they do these terrible things to parents. They put gum and toys about this high, right? So the little girl picks up a Matchbox car, and she says, "Dad, look at that! Can I have it?" And he says, "Oh, those are not for girls. Here, let's put that back." Okay. Right? He's not being mean. He's just sending a message, right? So it's through these years and years of socialization that we come to not even be aware. But I want to talk for a moment about research, because I want to embed this in some research that really started taking place in the 70s, 80s, but in the late 1990s, early 2000s, we saw some interesting research come out. Two scholars rose to fame for their groundbreaking research on gendered communication. This is Deborah Tannen, right? And her little thing here actually should be saying she is a scholar at Harvard University. And this is Carol Gilligan. She's a psychologist at NYU. And in this time period, they wrote book after book after book about men and women actually being unable to communicate with one another. And we're going to show you how you can communicate with the opposite sex. They argued that men and women suffer from a complete inability to communicate, and that men and women actually speak very differently towards one another. And if you read our books, then we will help you bridge that gap between masculine and feminine culture and masculine and feminine communication styles. So here's some of the basic arguments, okay? Men and women, A, we cannot communicate with one another. Now, of course, we can talk. That's not what they're saying. It's not like we can't verbally talk, but we're missing each other. Like, I'm saying one thing and you're hearing me say this, right? Like, don't I look pretty? Yes, you do. Well, that's not what I wanted you to say. I wanted you to say I don't look fat. I didn't know that's what you wanted me to say, right? So there's this inability to talk to one another, and they actually said that we speak very differently, and it's through kind of recognition, if we can learn about these different speech communities and these different culture theses, they actually described men and women as different cultures. Think about how you've been learning about culture these past couple days. That men and women are actually in very different cultures. And this leads to people who have different ways of speaking, different ways of acting, different ways of interpreting, different values, different priorities. And that as people in, let's say, racial ethnic cultures, racial ethnic groups, we feel more comfortable with people from our racial ethnic group. Same thing with men and women. We feel comfortable, we feel more able to be ourselves in same-sex, same-gender cultures. And it's through this different cultures thesis that we even express and think about emotion differently. How we think about intimacy and how you express love, it's so different. These books resonated with millions of Americans. Ask your parents if they heard of a book called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Right? John Gray. Pseudo PhD. I said pseudo. Interesting fellow. What does that book say? Men, you are Martians. Women, you are Venusians. You literally live on different planets. You literally speak different languages. And so, if you men can learn to speak Venusian, and women, you can learn to speak Martian, everything will be great. Now, why did this resonate with so many people, do you think? That's not a that's what I want you to answer me. Why do you think that resonated? Because it sold millions and millions of books.
Reinforced the cultural construct that was already there.
It reinforced the cultural construct that was already there. Yes, other ideas. Yes, sir.
It seemed like easy answers for complicated.
That's really, it was an easy answer to what seemed like a complicated issue. Yes, ma'am.
You could stay in your box and the other person could still be foreign.
Interesting. You could stay in your box, the other person could still be foreign, and we could justify why men and women are so different, right? So here are some of the arguments they made about men and women. So women, this is coming from their books. Women talk more, we're more polite, we're indecisive, we're hesitant, right? Men talk and they want more airtime, they want to take up more space, they swear more, they don't have emotion, they speak asymmetrically in a straight line. More sports talk, insult each other, right? They insult, yeah, thumbs up on that one.
It's a common thing.
I agree. I mean, again, there's kernels of truth in this through how we've been socialized. Right? Women, we ask questions. Men are in competitive conversation. We support, men interrupt. Women overlap with PMRs. A PMR are things like this. Nodding heads. Right, so those are those positive kind of responses that we give with our body language. Okay? Men speak with authority. Women speak symmetrically, right? Symmetrically, asymmetrically, symmetrically. Men give commands. Now, again, how many of you have seen evidence of this? Absolutely, right? So what they argue is through a lot of their research, and by the way, their research typically was done with college students, and they asked them to come into rooms in a secluded room and have a conversation about a topic. And this is the evidence that they found. Carol Gilligan, for example, based all of her research off of dinner conversations. She would have dinner parties at her house, and she'd be secretly recording the conversations, noticing how men and women talk. There's some methodological problems there, right? The first one, the methodological problem, is you're simulating a conversation. The second one is you're secretly recording people, right? So this was their argument. Women are more into rapport talk. Men are into report talk. Now, think about this for a moment. Men, and you don't need to raise your hand, nor do women. Men, how many of you have felt women complain and nag a lot, okay? How many of you women are sick and tired of every time some man gets up to talk, he wants to talk about sports first? Again, not all men and not all women. Women, when you swear, how is that taken in when you say a swear word versus when a man says a swear word? How many of you have noticed that more comedians are male than female? Right? Is there this kind of socialization that men have of like competition talk and kind of getting back and forth at each other that develops maybe perhaps a greater sense of humor, or at least more comic ability, perhaps? So where did this come from? Well, in the beginning, God, no, I'm just kidding. Maltz and Borker would say that between the ages of 5 and 15, boys and girls interact typically, socially, primarily in same-sex groups. We hang out in same-sex groups. And interaction patterns play out in different ways, and they're strongly influenced by peers. The way that you talk has been greatly impacted by who you hang out with. How many of you look like your friends? You kind of dress like your friends. You kind of talk like your friends, right? I mean, we are social group creatures. And you're looking at your friend like, yeah, I don't look like you, and you don't look like me. We're just going to keep it that way. So when we interact with our peers for this huge 10-year period, we start to see, typically with little girls, how they play and how little boys play. Okay, and this has been looked at through research and looking at how boys and girls play differently. So just take a look at that for a moment. In terms of girls tending to play in smaller groups, men in larger groups, right? There's a sense of closeness or intimacy. Girls, you have to be invited into a group with another girl. With boys, anyone can play as long as you follow the rules, right? As long as you follow the rules, you can all play. Girls, it's more isolated. Women or little girls will use their words to hurt. They use their language to hurt. Men are just using their bodies. How do I know this? I have 2 boys. The child comes running into my room. Mom, he pulled out my hair. In fact, he did. There's like a chunk of hair gone. So I go into the other room, and he's standing there. Look what I did. And the kid's crying. Like, you pulled out part of his scalp, child. Why did you do that? Well, because he was sitting on me. So I did that. I mean, all my life, there has been cutting, throwing, pushing, chomping, whatever, biting, hitting. But there's also been words and meanness and just using our words and our bodies. I was in Best Buy with my children one time, in the cart. I thought maybe I'd keep them in the cart. They're little then. They're not 5'8" and 5'9" in the cart, don't worry. They're not that weird. And they're fighting. And one pushes the other one out of the cart onto his head. A little person from Best Buy in their little blue shirt. I'm sorry, ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to leave right now. And we would ask you never to come back. Jeff's pushing them in Costco, the double seat. He's pushing them, the younger one, as they're passing a woman, reaches out with his tongue and licks her arm.
Oh, goodness.
The husband turns around, sorry. He's like, where did they learn this? We don't lick each other in our family. Maybe in private, but I don't know. I didn't teach my kids to do this. I didn't teach them to be physical with their bodies. But they learn it in school with their friends. And teachers help out, don't they? Boys sit down in a line. All the little girls are sitting in a line. Boys, sit. No, sit. Right? Boys, be quiet. Shh. We need to have indoor voice. I don't know what indoor voice. Very different. Right? We've been socialized different, and we see it. Anytime without, make sure you get permission so you're not seen as a creeper. Go hang out like on an elementary school campus. Please get permission, especially you.
I work at an elementary
Okay, there
school,
you
so
go.
I have experience.
Right?
It's the funniest thing I'll ever see.
Look how we socialize our little boys and little girls, right? So what do these play results? We spend years and years in play. What do they result in? They result in social results of how we behave socially, right? Perhaps women are seen as more democratic. We're going to sit down and talk about it and take a vote. Boys are like, whoever can bonk the kid on the head the hardest will win. I mean, I make a joke of it, right? But to some extent, women have learned cooperativeness, right? Because we're not using our bodies to gain power, we're using our words. Confidential sharing, best friends and loyalty. I'm so glad I don't have girls. I mean, I kind of wanted one, like those people said after they said that to me in the grocery store. And I say that lovingly because I am a girl, but like the drama of friendship is very intense, I would think, in middle school. Women, is that correct? All I have right now are like, that kid bothers me, so I kicked him in the knee, and now we're fine. Well, you can't kick him in the knee. Again, I'm kind of hanging on to these stereotypes, aren't I? But the reality is that we as parents or brothers or sisters or whatever, we have the ability to encourage in all of our children both reflections of God's masculine and feminine qualities. And if, in fact, our culture asks us to be divided like this, no wonder those books sold millions. No wonder. But I'm going to argue in a moment that this is not healthy. Not that it's not healthy to be who you are, but it's not healthy to assume that all men and all women act in a certain way. So how does this play out in language? How does this then move from play to social behavior, then into language? Girls learn to create and maintain relationship with words. We criticize each other. And we have been taught, again, I'm playing on stereotypes, girls have been taught to interpret the speech of others. So when my husband says, and I say, how are you? Fine. No, but how are you? Fine. No, come on, Jeff. How are you? I said, I'm fine. The kid is fine. But I'm saying, no, you're not fine. Fine. Because I'm reading into what I think is there. And sometimes I'm right. And sometimes I'm so wrong. He's just fine. And he likes to say it that way. Right. So it's through our language, boys learn to assert positions of dominance with words. Men become good storytellers because of their ability to attract an audience with their body and their positioning and their competitive hierarchical talking. They gain the floor through interruptions and argumentation. And since men and women can end up speaking differently because of these different play experiences, we start to see even commonalities in the way we handle very specific things. For example, some of these common occurrences. Think about questions, just asking a question. Okay? Again, this is where the research of the folks that I've talked to you about, what they've come up with. Women, they say, will use questions for organizational and conversational management. I've been told I'm a really good question asker, right? I must have been taught somewhere along the way that in order to have a relationship with someone, I need to ask them all sorts of questions. That's maintaining a relationship. Men, according to the research, use questions just for information. Why did you do that? What was the outcome, right? Versus women, tell me why you felt that way. Tell me why you thought that way. This can lead to men viewing women as flighty, hopping from one topic to the other, while women view men as know-it-alls, always having an answer for everything. Again, we're both asking questions. We're both trying to get information. The research is saying that we're just going about it in different ways. PMRs, those positive minimal responses, right? Women use a lot as a signal that they're not just agreeing, but that they're listening, right? They nod, they yeah, Men tend to use very little, but when they do, they will use them from agreement. Yes. Women will actually use aggressive moves. Women use aggressive moves to be critical and insulting. Men use them as structural moves, strategic moves without literally meaning what they say. If a man insults a woman, she may take it more seriously than he meant it. If a woman insults a man, he may take it not seriously at all. In terms of problems, again, these are all things that we deal with. When we have a problem, women want to share their problems, men want to solve their problems. Again, this is where the research led us to think. And again, here's what's fun about it, or not, however you want to look at it. We all shake our head like, yeah, I've seen that before. Doesn't this seem really, really putting men and women in absolutely different boxes? I had dinner the other night with a friend of mine, here in LA, and we knew each other back home in Portland. He's a great guy, and I actually called him on something the other night. We were having dinner, and he's telling me all sorts of things, and I'm listening. And then he started asking me, he would kind of do that in conversation. Okay, tell me about you, tell me about me. So he asked me, and right when he asked me, his eyes went down to his phone, and he started looking around the room, and I'll just say his name was Joe. Joe, I'm here, like here, right? It's like, what? Like, no, like, I need you to, like, listen to me. He's like, I am. We have a good enough relationship where I could say it sure doesn't look like it. For whatever reason, to me, his looking around the room and checking his phone kind of said to me, like, I asked you, but I just asked you to be nice, right? And so later we kind of digested it. I'm like, were you, like, that's how I took it. He's like, no, I was totally listening. I just, like, don't maintain eye contact like you do, Melanie. Okay? Where does that come from? I think because in part, these prototypes are familiar. These caricatures are comfortable, right? Here's some caricatures. The guy who interrupts, the woman who doesn't speak up, or she's too shy for her own good, the man who doesn't apologize, the guy who never asks for directions. Here's something I notice, women, that we do a lot. We end our sentences on a question. Do you know what that sounds like when you say, I am sure that we're going to LA? Are you sure? I have a vested interest in this project. We've been socialized to do that. Pay attention to how men and women use their voice at the end of a sentence. It sends a message. I've also noticed something else with women. We say sorry a lot. Sorry. Stop doing that, please. And I'm kind of being serious, women. Unless you actually are sorry, don't say sorry. Right? That's my own, like, that's a soapbox right there, and I'll step down off of it. Right? So here's the real story, class, is that when we get to feel cozy without needing to be seen as crazy or wrong or strange, here's where we need to talk about this, because here's the real story, sorry. The real story, but I was, because I stepped on her shoe. Can you turn off the light for a second? These are some books I found at Barnes & Noble, okay? So again, this is the culture we're up against. Men don't pee straight, okay? And other things you should know about us. The best little book, Guide to Understanding Women. I have no idea why there's an octopus. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus, a practical guide for improving communication and getting what you want in your relationship, the Man Cave book. When the man in your life can't commit. Why women are crazy and men just don't understand. Women can't hear what men don't say. Right? Make him beg to be your boyfriend in 6 simple steps. Okay, that's highly problematic, wouldn't you think? Okay. And this is hard to see. There's a man with a little sperm on his head and a woman with a little egg on her head. And it's very difficult but it says the real story, how to understand the opposite sex. And my favorites, how to improve your marriage without talking about it. And my husband looked at that, he's like, that's a great advertisement for just sex all the time. That doesn't improve it. It doesn't? Okay, no, it doesn't. No, he didn't say that. Women may be from Venus, but men are really from Uranus. Ha ha! This is that culture, right? Any thoughts or questions before I kind of start bringing in some how we think about this? Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I just had a question from earlier.
Yeah.
It's still kind of there. I think we'll probably start addressing it. I don't know. But I wrote it down because it was complicated. But so basically, if we all have feminine and masculine qualities, then how do we empower men to be men, women to be women? Because like there's no mistaking we're not completely identical. Like
Correct.
we're different, but we still share a lot. So I'm just wondering, like, how does a man be a man and a woman be a woman?
I guess I'm a little confused as to what you're asking. How do we empower men to be men? Because I think the culture does that a lot.
Like the right way, I guess that's what I'm asking.
Okay.
Is like if all of this kind of I don't know, layers that you're putting on men, like you have to be this and you have to be that, and women you have to be this and you have to be that. Well, what's the actual truth? You know, so like right down to the bottom of it. Yeah, I mean we share a lot, but yeah, how am I different and like the same? It's complicated. Like I'm wrestling through.
It's hard to separate our gender from our personality, but I'm going to ask you to suspend that for a moment, right? Suspend your gender from your personality and your strengths and your weaknesses and what God calls you to be. Can you see that in and of itself separate from your gender, right? And if you can say that my gender is definitely part of who I am, and I will express my gender in masculine and or feminine ways. But my personality isn't linked necessarily to the fact that I'm a female or a male, right? So how do I encourage a man to be a man and a woman to be a woman? I would flip that question, and I'd say, how do I encourage a woman to be herself and a man to be his self? Because the minute I say I want to encourage a man to be a man, what I'm already doing is I'm setting up a category of what he needs to fit into, right? Our goal, class, our goal is to be countercultural. How far you want to take that counterculturalism is up to you. But if we're called as faith believers and Christ followers, our job is to be a bit countercultural in how we act and how we behave. I am not asking men to be women, and I'm not asking women to be men. I am not for matriarchy as much as I'm not for patriarchy. That's not the idea here. I don't think we should turn our little boys into little girls. And we shouldn't turn our little girls into little boys. But instead of saying, you act this way because you're a girl, like, get rid of that language. You act that way because of who you are. If it happens to be feminine because you're a girl, great. But your personality needs to be seen to some extent as almost separate, because the minute you link it to gender, the culture asks you to link it to feminine and masculine qualities.
That's helpful.
Yeah, I guess that's how I think about it. Yes, ma'am.
How would you define male and female then?
Like biological sex?
Yeah, anyway, like, how would you think of it?
I think of, when I use the word male and female, I think of biological sex and some of those variations. When I say masculine and feminine, I'm talking about gender. And gender is something we learn and we do. But we often see those as one and the same, right? Because I have a uterus and other things, I am kind and sweet. And because my husband has a penis, he is strong and tough. No. He's strong and tough because that's how his culture has asked him to be. I agree that testosterone plays into that. And I agree that estrogen plays into this. But because I have a uterus doesn't mean I can cook macaroni and cheese so much better. And that he can't change a diaper, right? So to me, male, female is referring to the stuff. Whatever mixture you have. Masculine, feminine is how you do it. Yes, ma'am.
So knowing and understanding that gender is socially constructed and gender expression in itself isn't inherently evil,
No.
where does that leave the church and Christians in regards to transgender individuals?
Yeah.
And then how do we actively combat gender discrimination, considering that 7 transgender individuals have already been killed this year, and 6 out of 7 of them have been women of color?
That is first of all, that's sad and should break all of our hearts that anyone was killed because of who they think they are. So I'm just going to express my own thoughts and beliefs on that, and transgendered, and we all have our different thoughts on that. My understanding of transgendered folks is that they feel in their heart of hearts that they are in the wrong body. That they are in the wrong body when they think of themselves, just like I think of myself, and then they look at their body, they think, this doesn't match with how I feel about myself as a person. It is different than, let's say, a transvestite, right? A transvestite is someone who perhaps dresses as the opposite sex for entertainment or fetish purposes, perhaps. But a transgendered person, there's a dysmorphic kind of sense of what I feel and what I see doesn't match. And so in order for me to feel normal, I need to act or maybe even look a different way. That is my medical, psychological understanding of transgendered people. Please feel free to tell me your thoughts on this. My belief, and again, I can say this because I work at a state school now. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, because I still am who I am, right? And my faith is who I am. But I would argue that the church should be embracing transgendered people as much as they're embracing cisgender people. When I say cis, C-I-S, that means people that their identity matches with their body. Because to me, it sounds to me, it was never a choice. The transgendered folks that I know, they'd say, do you think I chose this for myself? Do you think I could unchoose this for myself? That's my experience with transgendered friends of mine. So if we saw transgenderism as a biological, psychological condition, and again, I'm even hesitant to go there because then you're medicalizing something, right? Then why is it any different than the church inviting someone in who has diabetes or cancer? And I know that's so different. I want to make sure that I suggest that this is not a disease that needs fixing. But it is something in them biologically, psychologically, physically, where there's a mismatch. So please hear me when I say cancer and being transgendered are not the same. They're not. But in terms of seeing it as something that's not a choice, it's just, and again, that's my interaction with transgendered folks. And I think the Christian church it's hard. How do we do this? George Fox has a transgendered individual who's trying really hard to say, I have a place on this campus and I don't want to live with women. Even though biologically I'm a woman, it doesn't make sense for me to live with women. I need to live with men because in my mind and who I am, I'm a man. Right? That's my take. That's my personal opinion on this. And I've thought and prayed about it a lot. And that's the piece that I come at it because the folks that I know that are transgendered. And thank goodness I'm not the judge. Thank goodness I'm not the judge of people's destiny. Yes, sir.
So if that's your understanding there, where does homosexuality fall into that?
All right. Again, everyone in this room has probably thought about this, talked about it. You have friends that are gay, lesbian, bi, transgendered, queer, right? My heart, me and my partner's heart, and what we've taught our children is that our job is to love and to be in community with people that we love. And I work with two gay people. They're colleagues of mine. And I've worked and known a lot of folks, right? We all have. We all do. We may even be some of those folks in this room. I think where the church has gone wrong is that when a young person comes to a pastor or to a teacher and says, I think I have same-sex attraction, that right away it is assumed that you're gay or lesbian. When our sexuality is on a continuum, may I dare say that it's kind of normal in our upbringing to have a little bit of that same-sex attraction. I think our sexuality is on that continuum. So to say, you're gay or lesbian, let's get rid of that, let's ignore that. I think instead we do a really bad job of sitting down with someone and saying, let's explore your sexuality that God gave you, right? So where do gay and lesbian folks fit in the church? I don't know. But I do feel very strongly that everyone has a voice at the table. I'm just going to say that. How to improve your marriage without talking about it. Just kidding. No, I think this is really important, and I would love to hear your thoughts on that, because that's really important. And I can talk, it's so interesting to talk about it in this environment than to talk about it in other environments that we're in, right? And I think we can all agree, we're here to love, and we're here to love, even when it's difficult. Doesn't mean we have to agree. Doesn't mean we have to say what you're doing is right in our understanding of what is right and wrong. That is not, by loving someone, you're not saying, I accept, I condone what you're doing, but I will love you up, down, left, right, back and forth. Yes, sir.
So to take a step back onto the transgender issue, do you think that the gender stereotypes, the schemas that we place on society, what is masculine, what is feminine, do you think that has any play into the effect, or the effect that has on people who decide, well, my body tells me I'm a man, but my mind tells me I'm a woman?
Right.
Do you think, like, because we say, oh, men should be interested in sports, cars, all of these things, and then a boy grows up thinking, well, I'm not interested in sports, I'm not interested in cars, I must be a girl.
Right.
Do you think that has any play?
You know, I think our culture messes with us all the time in that way. Because, I mean, think about it. When you want to figure out what to buy a little boy or a little girl for a present, it's pretty clear. Like, these are two separate worlds. These are two separate worlds. But my understanding of transgendered has less to do with the things that I like, has more to do with the body that I'm in that is not connected. That's my understanding. So I think, yeah, like my friend Jace, who will transition from female to male, I've asked him before, I've said, Jace, so now that you live life as a man, do you feel more comfortable? He's like, absolutely. I said, but now that you live your life as a man, are you more sensitive to how men treat women? Like, because you were living as a woman, do you now see what it's like from a male's perspective, how women are treated, et cetera, et cetera? And he says, yes, but in the conversations I've had with him, Jace has said, I often feel pressure to act like a guy. And just him saying that suggests that gender is something we do. I mean, there are parts of him that are, if he walked in there, you would never know. He is a male. He looks male. But he often says, I sometimes feel like I'm putting on maleness so that I can fit in with my male friends. So there's something going on there. And the culture plays into that. Yeah, great question. Any other thoughts? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think I could definitely connect with that, especially what you said. Because for me, I feel like I've had a couple experiences where I've kind of felt that pressure to act like male.
Yeah.
Because I've been called a bunch of stuff. I mean, recently the most thing I've heard was girl with a beard. And stuff like that. And so, like, there's like this, sorry, it's just a little hard.
Sure.
But there's like this tension sometimes, you know, like you think about it, like, is there something that I'm doing that is a little bit different, or that's not okay? Or is there something else that I should be doing? So I can definitely admit that I do have this difficulty. Like, if I have to fake who I am, because I am a certain way. And to me, when I think about myself, I just think about myself as a person, as an individual.
Yeah.
But then, like, I open my eyes a bit, and then I look at the reality around me, and it seems like there are some expectations. And yeah, I feel like for, I don't know, many years now, there's been like that struggle. Like, maybe I have to like act like I like sports, you know, even though I really don't. You know, I like doing sports on my own, but it doesn't really mean that like I'm fully engaged in sports, or that I have to, you know, pretend like I don't like something that I do, like writing poetry or music. So for me, I think another question is like, what advice would you give to somebody who's struggling with that, or do you just say continue to embrace who I am, and continue to be myself that way?
I don't necessarily have advice, but what I can say is that I hope that you surround yourself with people that would never, ever say that to you again. Right? And I hope that they would call you a girl with a beard. And that people that do that to you, as difficult as I'm sure it is to just turn away, because that sinks in. You can't unhear that. Right? You can't unhear that. That sticks with you. But can you surround yourself with men and women, but especially men, that will affirm your masculinity, right? Because if there are a group of men that can affirm your masculinity and however you express it, then that feeling of needing to hide who you are will begin to dissipate. So who are those men in your life that you can be honest with and say, I need you to affirm my masculinity however that works out. I also think that college is really awful sometimes. And I don't mean that in the way of like, oh boy, this is a terrible place and a terrible time. But these years in college, I think, are in so many ways very unrealistic of real life. And my hope is that when you leave college, that you will be in places and in spaces with people that you see all different types of masculinity. Because I think on any campus, there's going to be a type of masculinity that is the most dominant and a type of femininity that is the most dominant. And if you don't fit into that category, then you will feel that strain of like, but I don't fit in, so maybe I'm not really masculine. But my hope is that when you exit this place, you're going to see a wide variety of masculinity types, and never to doubt that you're less masculine. I mean, I think anyone that just heard you say that, which by the way, that was really awesome that you shared that in a group of perhaps strangers. I want to affirm that. That's really brave and strong and vulnerable, masculine and feminine. That I think most people in this room, when they heard you say that, would say, I am, like, that is awful that you feel that way. And I would never, ever want to be someone who would make you feel that way. So I just think surrounding ourselves with men and women that affirm who we are is really important. And that's sometimes harder to do than others. But, like, you're so masculine right now and all the time. I don't even know you. And if a man looks at you and heard what you just said and says, that's weak, that you're not weak, he's weak, in my opinion. Or if a woman looks at you and says he's not masculine, that's her problem, that's not your problem. That's about them, that's not about you. When someone criticizes us for who we are, it is not about us. It's about them. In so many ways. Don't you think? Yeah. So I want to kind of conclude with how I see this working into our relationship with Christ and with others. In the beginning, God created a team. God created a team, a mixed gender team of one man and one woman. And before the fall, these two people were jointly tasked with stewarding all that they had been given. In the beginning, God created a team. But then after the fall, there was disharmony in the team. And there was enmity between them, and there was hierarchy and domination and curses that were given to each member of that team, and that's the world we live in today. We do not live before the fall. We live in a world where we are broken, and our culture is broken. The world of the Old Testament, like nearly all societies, was patriarchal. Women were property. And that didn't just hurt women, that hurt men as well, to have someone be property, to have a human being be property. So it's not surprising when we look in the Bible, when we saw women leaders who were few and far between. But when we did see them, like Miriam and Deborah, who were working alongside men, not behind men, not sitting in a chair and he was standing at the podium, working alongside them, that was an unusual team. But in the telling of their stories in the Bible, There's no mention of a particular gender style of leadership. There was no mention of women lead children, women speak softly, men lead adults, men lead other men. There was no mention of the way in which they led. It was just that they both led, although countercultural. In the New Testament, Jesus gave us a model for Christian leadership. And if you really read it carefully, his model is surprising because it's confounding the stereotypes. Think about your own gender assumptions. When Jesus wept, when Jesus washed the feet, got down on the ground, when Jesus fed, when Jesus held, when Jesus cried, when Jesus laughed, how are those juxtaposed with the same Jesus that was strong and powerful and lashed out? It's the same Jesus, the same God. God created a team, and Jesus embodied that team. The rest of the New Testament also challenges our assumptions about gender. Think about the spirit of Pentecost, right? As it ushered in a new era and restoring what was lost. Peter said this, "In the last days, God says, I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Even on my servants, both men and women." It says it twice. Both men and women, I will pour out my spirit in those days and they will prophesy. There's no hint. It's not anywhere in the New Testament that gifts are apportioned according to gender. Women are prophesying, men are prophesying. It's not about gender, but it is contextualized in a culture where men owned women. In the rest of Acts and in Paul's letters, we see how this prophecy began to be fulfilled, despite the cultural context. So here's the thing, class. We're living in that time right now. It's just like 2,000 years later. We are the same men and women that Paul was talking about to some extent. Men, you will both prophesy. Women, you will prophesy. Men, you will ache and yearn and love and cry. And women, you will be strong and powerful leaders, because it's not about gender. It's about who we were created to be. The danger of being too aware of gender differences is that we overlook what we all have in common. We all have something in common. If I could just strip away all these little messages that say, I am female and you are male, if we could just strip that away, let's just pretend that all of us in this room, instead of being in bodies, we just had like little bubbles, like caption bubbles, right? And you look around and you see what everyone's thinking and where their heart is at, and you don't see gender. You just see people for who they are. That is not denying the beauty of your femininity, women, and that is not denying the strength of your masculinity, men, because God gave you that. That's who you are, just like some of you are white, and some of you are brown, and some of you are black, and some of you are in between, and some of you are all over the place. That's who you are, but it doesn't define you. My gender doesn't define me. It's part of me, and I like it, but it doesn't define me. My little bubble, that's all you could see, and that's all I could see of the men in my life. We all have the same thing to do. So perhaps a better way of thinking about our relationships, whether you're supervising someone, working with someone, in a romantic relationship with someone, reporting to someone, having a conversation with someone, is to see that person, period, as an individual first. And it's really hard because we dress ourselves up all the time. We make sure you know that we are male or female. But pretend to see just little bubbles of people. I've worked in a lot of mixed gender teams, and I have never found gender differences in communication style to be the most significant aspect to bear in mind. That's not the biggest hurdle that I have had to overcome in mixed gender groups. Because here's the bottom line. I don't care who we are. We all have something in common. We want to be heard and we want to be known. And that right there is the biggest issue that we have to think about in mixed gender groups. We all want to be heard and we all want to be known. So if we can just decide on that right now, that in communication with one another, we are not coming at it from different planets. We live on the same planet. It is a fallen planet that asks us to constantly see us as different. And not only different, but one is seen as better than the other. That's messed up. And that's not what God wanted. In fact, he created a team. I think we should all go into our Bibles and write, in the beginning God created. That might be blasphemous, I don't know. He did. He made a team. And I'm not using that word as a sports reference. Although if you'd like to go there with a sports reference, it is a sports reference. We must above all learn to listen to each other, trust one another, and find points of commonality. As human beings, male and female and everything in between, we all thrive if we feel people care about us. I love with every ounce of my being Jeff Hulbert. That kid has changed my life. Not because he's a man, but because he's Jeff. And there are beautiful things about that man, the most masculine things about that man that make him all the more beautiful to me. But then there's these other parts of him, whether you want to call him feminine or not, that make him just as awesome and interesting and profound. And the reason we can be that way with each other is because we're not determining what we think the other should be. And that's taken a long time to figure that out. It took years to say, I'm not my gender, Jeff, and you're not your gender. It's part of us. But if we're going to make a decision in this family, it's not just your decision to make or my decision to make. It's not even our decision to make. It's God's first, and then we got to talk about it. We thrive if we feel cared about as individuals. We thrive when we say no to the stereotypes, but feel okay if sometimes we live into them, because that's who we are. But not to rely on them and to say that that defines me. I don't know about you. I would love to be seen as gentle and emotional and loving, because I am. But I'm also like super strong. And I'm not saying that like, I am woman, hear me roar. I think that's crap. We should say, I am human, hear me roar. Right? I'm strong. And I'm selfish. And I'm weak. And I'm tough. And I'm broken. And I'm beautiful. Not because of my gender or my genitalia. I think that's what we need to remember. So in your communication with the opposite gender, opposite sex, opposite whatever, like let's let go of the word opposite. We're not. We're just in different packages. My challenge to us is, and to me, I promise to respect and honor your masculine traits, your feminine traits, and your godly traits. And guess what? They're all godly traits. I will respect and honor that. And I will not cast you into a stereotype because of all the experience I have seen on the media of what you should be like. I will not do that. I promise you, I will not judge you based on a stereotype unless you show me otherwise. But I will respect and honor you in all your femininity and all your masculinity. I think that's what we can work towards. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. We have a couple minutes for questions, and then we can head out. Yes, sir.
This is in a little bit of a different direction. So in looking at masculine and feminine traits and gender construction, I'm really curious as to your opinion on how it plays into future gender roles. Like some of the biggest fights that I've ever had with people are about stay-at-home dads or moms that go to work or having both parents working, and et cetera. So when we're examining these traits, how does that play into gender roles in the future? And even from a biblical standpoint, like I've heard people use the Bible to justify mom needs to stay home or dad only dad can work, et cetera. So how do we kind of
I said this the other day. I am so tired of stay-at-home dads being seen as amazing. Not because they're stay-at-home dads, but because they're seen as odd. You're amazing because there aren't many of you. And I'm tired of hearing women feel bad because they are choosing to stay home. Like, it's not about your gender, it's about what you're called to do. If you're called to stay home with your kids because you're better at it, then do it. And screw what the media says in so many ways. Let's just say that. It's about what you're called. It's about vocation, not occupation. Vocation. What are you called to do? And if someone else outside your little circle wants to say, oh, you're so awesome that you're a stay-at-home dad, say, no, I'm just awesome because I'm a parent. Right? Now, I might be a little cynical right now. But, I mean, in essence, right? Like, I don't want to kind of pussyfoot around this. I just want to say, like, if that's what you're called to do, then you should do it. And the media has no right to cast you in a certain light. Women, if you want to stay home, or if you don't want to have kids, or you want to have kids, the media has done a really good job of pitting women against women. Like someone's better than the other. That's not true. That is so not true. And the reality is, less than 10% of American families today have a breadwinner and homemaker. The reality is you will both work unless you're infinitely wealthy. So work it out between the two of you. I think that's God's call in our life too. What are you called to do? Whether it's stereotypical or not. Yes, sir.
Sorry for interrupting, but can we do the
Oh, we need to actually. So last question, and then we'll go to that.
Just went outside my gender stereotype and interrupted.
No, you didn't. You just were doing your thing. Last question, and then we'll do the. Yes, sir.
So I was curious. You understand how, like, you think of how women, or mothers, I should say, they have like this innate ability of like understand, like their child say mom. Like, if you've heard stories of like a child say mom, right? And there's a bunch of moms, there's a bunch of kids around, but like a woman or a mother will hear her child's voice and know like that's my child. So do you think there's certain things that a mother, like there's certain qualities that a mother and father have that they bring to their kid that is not necessarily being a male and a female, but it's just a mother and a father? Like, you see what I'm trying to say here?
So it's based on biology,
Well,
or based on the fact that one gave birth and the other didn't?
yeah, maybe like that, like just a mother and father more so than a male and female.
I don't think so. I mean, I believe that there's probably things that go on in a woman's body for sure that releases some sort of hormones, but I don't think because I'm a father I couldn't be in tune with those things.
Okay.
That's my opinion. But I would love to see some biological evidence to support the opposite. You guys are awesome. So go out and communicate in loving, awesome ways.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.